Sare nu pyar ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ Sonia West. Welcome to Khas Mulakat. Today in the studio we have a couple of cast members from Heirlooms and Baggage, My Mother's Story. What is this all about? We all have mothers. This is going to be stories about mothers, and we're going to share ours as well. So let's welcome them to the studio and talk about the project that they're working on. So welcome Camryn and Eric Keenleyside. So welcome to the studio. It's very exciting to have you here. So thank you for joining us today. Heirlooms and Baggage, My Mother's Story. The title itself is interesting because heirlooms, I mean, mothers have heirlooms, and baggage. That kind of makes it sound like, we've got issues with our mothers. Am I reading this correctly?
Yeah. There's
Okay.
also a lot of things that we inherit from our mothers, both the good and the bad, the things that they've gone through.
Right.
I know for myself, I really dived deep into my own mother's history and my family history throughout generations. So for instance, my great-grandfather coming to Canada, having to pay the Chinese head tax to come over to Canada, and being separated from his family when doing that, when having to send money back to his family who were experiencing poverty and war in China, and being separated from his son, my grandfather, until my grandfather was 12 years old, and kind of how that's affected my family throughout generations, and that even though that's further back, that's still my mother's story.
Right.
And we've been really diving into what makes up a mother's story and all of the many things, both the heirlooms, the shiny things, plus the baggage, which
Right.
makes up a whole life.
Yeah. Eric, you're laughing a bit here because we all have our own mother's story. I mean, that's a
Sure.
very unique story to you.
Yeah.
But we all have our own because we all have a mother. Just like we talked off camera, I said, well, tell me about the story. And you said, well, we've all got mothers. So you were laughing just now.
Well, the play really came from a project called My Mother's Story that Marilyn Norrie originated quite some time ago, just getting people to write the stories of their mother. She became, she was unhappy with the way that women's stories aren't told very often in general in society. So she got people to come and do workshops and write their own mother's story. She developed quite a system for getting people to do this. She's got a website for it now. And over the time that she's done it, they've often done public readings of those stories and some dramatizations. This is the first time that it's been done in this way.
Right.
It's sort of the story of the five of us children of mothers coming to grips with how to tell our mother's stories and what do we know about our mothers and how do we find things out and what are people interested in, and we become interested in each other's stories. And so it's sort of an enmeshing of all these five stories together
Right.
through the lives of the mothers and also how it affects us,
Right.
the people.
I can imagine this would be a kind of a journey of not just like, memories of happiness, but also maybe some memories of like pain.
Sure.
Yeah.
So did that bring a lot of maybe personal feelings to the surface? Did you have anybody kind of break down and cry?
Yeah.
Well, I think
absolutely.
everybody did at one point or another, but everybody's story is diverse and wide-ranging, right? So we were interested in finding out what people wanted to tell about their mothers and what they knew and what they didn't know. And some things you're never going to find out. My mom's been dead for a couple of years. My wife, Peg, who's also in the show, her mom's been dead for over a decade now.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that we can't ask them anymore. So Marilyn has a sort of a system of figuring things out, asking sisters and brothers and aunts questions and
Right.
stories that people remember from the past. It's really good to investigate them and write them down, and you discover all sorts of things that you didn't know. Some good, some difficult. But I think they're all just as valuable. The difficult
Right.
things sometimes answer questions that you've had all your life about why was my mom like this? And maybe we found out some of those
Right.
things.
It's
Yeah.
sounds like almost like a movement where you're learning about your mother, and you wouldn't ask these things, right? You would never sit down with your mom and say, "Tell me about yourself."
Well, we
That's not
did.
something we do.
I
normally.
did before she died. We started this project
too.
before she died, and I said, I'm doing this project, and I've got a couple of questions I want to ask you. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not wild about this idea. So,
Right. Yeah.
well, that's part of the whole process of telling the story.
Yeah.
You can ask your mom, she may not tell you, or she'll tell you things that you never knew. That there are a lot of, every family has this sort of standard stories that get told every year at Christmas about something that happened 40 years ago or something like that. And
Right.
it's interesting to find out what the origins of that story are and why it became the story that everyone tells every year or every couple of years or something like that.
Right. Well, when you think about it, your mother was once a young girl,
Oh, yeah.
right? So that's
Exactly.
probably something that would be shocking to a lot of people to realize that their mother was actually a young person at one time who had the same needs and desires and wants that we all have.
Exactly. And leading into that, that was actually the point where I did fully break down and cry in rehearsal, was that realization that my mother is just a human herself and really having that land. It was at a point where I was really thinking about the ways my mother has had to move through the world as an Asian woman, and the ways that she's had to protect me as well, and the lessons she's had to teach me from that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can see on your face. I can connect with that. I'm from a family that's not, I guess, not Caucasian. But yeah, there's challenges for Caucasian families as well. Every family has, like you said, a story. So when we talk about people that are coming to see this, we joke that everybody should see this because everybody's got a mom. But what kind of audience are you expecting to see?
A lot of people come with their mothers. I mean, Mother's Day is coming up sooner or later, and a lot of people are interested in taking their mom to a show like this to start a conversation, because it's the sort of thing where every time we do this show, there's a talk back afterwards where people give their reactions or ask us questions, and always people have stories that they want to tell. Or they have questions about, well, how did you get your mother to tell you that part of the story?
Right.
And that's fascinating for most people. They don't think of their mom usually as a woman, as a human being. And that's one of the things that we really discovered as we were going along. You said as a girl, but also as a mother and as a grandmother and as all those other things. I think of my mom because I spent my whole life with her, right? And that's the way I think of her. Thinking about how other people saw her is a very different kind of thing.
Right, perspective. So in the cast, there's 5 people?
That's right.
So tell us a bit about the cast members.
Yeah, we have Renee Iachi, who is a great educator and actor, and the founder of Shameless Hussy Productions as well, which is a big theater company in Vancouver.
Right.
And we have Ragini Kapil, who is a retired principal and educator who is also working as a stand-up comedian and as an actor and is amazing, wears many hats.
Right.
We also have Eric's partner, Peg Christofferson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the 2 of you. So these stories that are being told, are they intertwined at all? Like how?
Oh, yes.
It is.
That's
intertwined.
the conceit is that it's the 5 of us getting together to investigate these things and tell the stories. So it starts out with some memories, and then it starts with what happened when they were kids. What happened? What was their education like? How did they meet their partners? And so on through their lives. And you can follow the stories by identifying with the people. There are slides showing in the background, and there's music, and it's kind of an immersive experience. And I think it's easy to follow who's who and what's what, but they're all really interesting stories.
Yeah, there's really 2 parts of the play. There's us discovering our mother's story, and there's also our mother's story as well. But a big part is the process of actually writing your mother's story, which we explore in the play. Yeah.
And how long is the whole production?
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
No intermission.
No intermission. Well, you probably wouldn't need one. Sometimes when, if you are enjoying it, you don't want the intermission. So I feel like just talking to you, I think it's going to be a great evening. And I was curious as to who your audience would be, just because I want to make sure that our viewers are aware about the kind of the dynamic of what they're going to be experiencing.
Well, the range in age is of the actors is 20s to 60s. So we've got people all the way along, and each of the stories is different. Ragini is South Asian. Her family grew up in Fiji and then moved to Nelson, BC. Camryn's family is Asian. Mine is European. There's a lot of variation in those things.
Right.
And one of the things that we're aiming for is the universal quality of it, that it doesn't matter who you are or where you came from. it's also about the mothers of the people in the audience, to get them to think about, well, that's similar to something that happened to my mom, or
Right.
that never happened to my mom. My mom never had that opportunity. But then it gets them thinking about those things that are sometimes just put on a shelf in people's memories, right? They don't think an awful lot about their mom's education, or, you know,
Yeah.
how many boyfriends did she have before she got married? That kind of question is sort of
Right.
interesting sometimes.
Yes.
A lot of moms might not want to talk about that, but you never know.
Yeah, but isn't it fantastic that this type of a production, when the people are watching in the audience, that question that you posed about how many boyfriends did the mom have, for certain cultures, that's very taboo.
Sure.
So I could imagine an Indian woman in the audience being like, oh my goodness, like, don't talk more about that, like being a little shy about it, but there might be some truth to that. So it's a good starting point.
Well, and I think everybody's interested in those questions. And if
course.
the answer is mind your own business, then that's the answer.
That's the
right?
answer, that's
then
right.
that's and that's what happened to us a lot of the time.
Yeah.
My mom didn't like talking about the stories about her life before she came to Canada at all. She just didn't want to.
Right.
And that's part of my journey of discovering, well, how did she end up being the person that she was?
Right. What kinds of challenges have you faced during the production? I mean, it could be something maybe not even related to having to get that information from your mother, but any challenges? Because doing live theater compared to watching stuff on TV, you know, before we even started, I mentioned the fact that I'm really excited that this is a real actors acting in front of people. That's a hard thing to do, and it's not a lost art, but it's not as much at the forefront as it was. And I want it to come back because it's amazing.
Well, I think Marilyn Norrie was who originated the project, is also a screenwriter and a dramatist, and she's been really pivotal in shaping the stories. I mean, if we told all of the stories that we came up with and we wrote, it would be, I don't know, 12 or 13 hours long.
Right.
It's picking things that go with the other things and putting them together.
Yeah.
And then when we rehearse, we learn, we're telling one big story made up of a bunch of different little stories.
Right.
And it's fascinating, and I think it's really worthwhile.
So the challenges then, did you have a lot of challenges during this whole process?
Yeah, one big thing that jumps to mind right away is I was actually extremely nervous to ask my mother's permission to tell her story on stage. And that was a big sticking point for me, which I had to get through.
Right.
And I had to work up the courage to do that, just to ask her if it was okay to tell her story on stage, because that's such a daunting thing to
Yes.
ask someone, can I tell your entire life story on a stage to many people? And we actually ended up writing that fear ofine into the show,
Yeah.
which was amazing.
Yeah.
We have a whole moment where I'm asking her permission via text, and I finally get her permission.
Right.
And she's actually happy that I'm telling her story on stage, which was what ended up being what happened in real life as well.
Right. That's a relatable moment. I could imagine myself. Mine wouldn't be over text though, because she would just not answer me. My mom would be like, "There's no way." But I wonder about siblings even, because yes, we're talking about mothers, but then there's all the siblings that are like, "You can't talk about mom. You can't tell her story." I'm sure there's a lot of that as well, like a little bit of pushback from siblings. I come from a family of all girls. There's 4 of us, so I can imagine there's a lot of, you can't talk about our mother like that.
Well, on the other hand, my brother, I have one brother, and we've all our lives wanted to know more about our mother's life before she came to Canada. And I would get a phone call in the middle of the night saying, "Mom just told me the story about such and such and such and such." And we would write it down immediately and email it to each other so that we didn't forget. And but going back to what you were saying about the live theater aspect of
Yes.
it, that's definitely it's in the room, in the theater. You can feel that it's really happening. There are real people speaking to each other, speaking directly to the audience, and you never know what might happen. On a TV show, if you make a mistake, you stop and go back and correct it or something like that. But the interactions between people have a real electric feeling,
Right.
especially when things are happening all at the same time and building on each other, and there's some excitement in the room. It's a real event that's happening, not something that you're watching eating popcorn or
That's
something
right.
like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's real. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Because when you're watching TV, like you said, they edit so much that you don't know what's being presented is not actually what is. But live theater, I mean.
And everyone makes mistakes. It's different every night. It's different
Yeah.
every time we do it.
Right.
Sometimes better, sometimes not quite so good, and sometimes somebody makes a mistake, and then something really interesting happens because of that, because a real reaction comes to the mistake.
Right.
Exactly. And with a show like this, which requires so much authenticity from us, the live theater aspect really brings that immediacy and also allows for the messiness of what writing your mother's story is. Yeah. And all of the nuance that comes with that.
Right. So is it loosely scripted then? You have an idea of what you're going to say?
Oh no, it's scripted.
Okay, it is scripted.
We've changed it, and
Right.
we can change it, and some things get changed here and there again, a little improvement, something like that. What if I said that? Well, maybe, but we can't change a lot of things because we can't change the cues at the end of the speeches because the next person uses that to say what they're going to say.
Absolutely,
So if you change things too much, it can be a little bit.
They're
difficult.
waiting for their cue and it never comes, right? So you have to cover a lot of the time because when you're acting and somebody messes up with the cue not being given or whatever, you have to quickly shuffle around. And
That never happens in our company.
I feel like you're catching a lot of the balls that are in the air. I feel like you probably cover quite well.
Well, that's what live theater is all about, and it's not so much about making mistakes, but just being there,
But listening.
Being in the space, and if somebody says something, you react to what they say, not to what you imagine they might have said.
Right. So the lighting, the music, all that stuff. Tell me a little bit about that because I'm assuming there must be music.
Yeah,
Yep,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That reflects the musical tastes of the mothers and the era that we're talking about.
Okay.
If something takes place in the 60s, there's a bit of jazz in the background that comes from that era. And on the stage, there are platforms and trunks and things like that, but then hanging in the back are a series of large white framed, they look like picture frames, but they're basically projection screens.
Right.
And so images of the mothers will come up here and there, and a headline from a newspaper or a picture of the cottage at Powell River or something like that.
Yeah, we thankfully have been able to work with an awesome projections designer. So having those projections up on screen for us, whether it be pictures of our mother, pictures of us, pictures of people who are important in our mother's lives. For me, I was able to have a projection of my great-grandfather's Chinese head tax certificate to share with the audience, which is very powerful on stage.
Right. So are these Canadian stories then? Like, I mean, they originate in Europe and in China, you said.
Yeah.
And probably India and Fiji and all this. But at the end of the day, it is Canadian moms.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Canada, we used to say it was a melting pot. And it is I guess, what do they call it? A tapestry.
Or a mosaic, yeah. That was
Mosaic.
the contrast I grew up with was that they said the United States was a melting pot, Canada was a mosaic. In other words, you kept your identity when you came to Canada.
Right.
And I think that's true of a lot of people and a lot of cultures. They don't feel they have to become just like everybody else.
Right.
So that's one of the richest things about telling any kind of story like that is that you hear from different parts of the country and different cultures.
Yeah. I think the most beautiful thing, the message here of having this story is you can come from anywhere in the world. And like you said, everybody's got a mother. And that's one thing, whatever language you speak, whatever differences we have, that one similarity that when people come and see this, they're all going to be like, oh, that's like my mom. And they can totally see themselves in probably each character. So that's very exciting.
There's something else about, oftentimes family stories are about the dad and what the dad does for a living. Oh, we're a fireman's family. I'm a university professor's family.
Right.
Something like that. But mums, although they are firemen and university professors and all of those things, they have in the past been seen only as caregivers and cooks and nurturers and caregivers.
Expected to fill a certain role.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're trying to look past that into them as people
Right.
without necessarily the overarching profession or influence of the dad.
Right.
So it's not that the dads aren't mentioned or aren't there, but we're focusing on the mums.
I think that's wonderful. And I'm sure maybe a lot of kids will go with their mom. And it would be nice for the kid to be like, wow, my mom is a real person.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that's probably the biggest message is mom has a story and everyone can share those.
The first time we did this, we had a board out front with and asked people to write things on Post-it notes and stick them up. And we had questions like, what's something your mom always said? And what's something that you remember that your mom did that really surprised you,
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. And that's an excellent way to start. We got some fascinating answers to those things.
Right.
We started incorporating some of them in the show, just like sayings that mums have.
Yeah.
But we ended up going more with things that our own mums said.
Right. Well, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's February 12th and 13th.
That's right.
And it's at the North Delta Center for the Arts. So
That's right.
we're excited. And you're still selling tickets. So we're going to put all that information on the screen to make sure that people that are watching our program can actually watch yours as well.
Great.
Yeah. If there's a message you want to give to anybody watching, one final message, you can go ahead, Eric. We'll start with Camryn. Camryn, you can start with your message.
Every mother has a story, and please feel empowered to explore yours. Come see the show and then visit mymotherstory.org to start discovering writing your own mother's story, because you have a great one.
I think you'll find that your own mother's story means more to you when you think about other people's mother's story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We look forward to watching the program on February 12th and 13th. We can go to both shows or we can pick one, but
That's
definitely
right.
bring your mother, bring your mother-in-law, bring your daughter, your son, bring anybody. It's going to be a heartfelt evening, so we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have all the information on the screen for getting tickets. So
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you. ਇਹ ਸੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ। ਉਮੀਦ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਸੰਦ ਆਇਆ। ਫਿਰ ਤੇ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਸੋਨੀ ਵੈਸਟ। ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।